backwoods night. Red lights cutting through the pine in flight. Bigfoot stomping with his youngling beard. Whispers of tales that ain't too clear. UFOs buzzing solo through the haze. Howling banshees set the forest ablaze. Jersey devil howls drink rays to the sky. Drunken cryptids party until the morning's night. Yeah. It's showtime, running wild in the moonlight. Stars burn down, watch the freaks all take flight.
To good times.
Raise your glasses to the mysteries divine. It's showtime.
Thank you so very much for joining me this morning. I mean, this is probably a dream come true. So I'm a little fangirling right now. I've been a huge fan of yours since about 2012, 2013 when I first saw you on America Unearthed. And I started put documentaries on at night. They kind of turn my head off and be able to go to sleep. Your episodes, I couldn't turn off. I mean, I sit up in bed and be going, whoa, whoa. And you had such a really awesome, unique approach to it, through, with your degrees in geology, breaking the layers down, where this would be found at, what time era, how this would work.
Right.
And I mean, you could describe it a lot better than I can. And I have to apologize. I am fighting laryngitis. And I was really close to rescheduling, but I was like, nope, I got a chance to do it. I got to jump on it. Here we are.
Well, that's quite all right. That's quite all right. I'm happy to answer any questions. And yeah, it's been a while now since we did 3 seasons of America Unearthed, and then we were put on hold. I'm trying to remember what the hell happened, why we were put on hold. I can't remember. Yeah, but anyway, we were put on hold, and then I remember now. Anyway, well, you want to hear the story?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, jump into the beginning. What led you into America Unearthed and wanting to do the research on the Knights of the Templar and the Vikings coming over?
Yeah. Well, really, the whole thing started back in July of 2000 when I was, I'm working at at that point, I had founded American Petrographic Services, my materials forensic laboratory, where we primarily look at concrete and other construction materials that have had problems or failed. And I started that in January of 1990. And then in July of 2000, I was contacted by a representative with the Runestone Museum up in Alexandria, Minnesota. And they wanted me to look at forensically the Kensington runestone to try to age date the weathering of the inscription. And when they approached me and he's telling me all about this, I'm like, dude, what is the Kensington runestone? I never heard of it. I didn't know what he was talking about. He had gone up to the University of Minnesota, Duluth, where I went to college and graduated back, when was that? Back in the early 80s. I don't even remember what it was. But anyway, those professors up there, my professors had referred this guy to me. That's how he got to me. So anyway, I'm listening to him and I said, well, I have a couple of ideas and I'll be happy to do this work for you. But you need to understand that when I get done, I may come back and give you news you're not going to like. And you're still going to pay me, which is a beautiful thing about forensic. It doesn't matter what the results are. I get paid either way. But I wanted him to understand that I'm not an advocate for anybody. We generate the data, we interpret the data, and if we have enough information, we will draw a conclusion. And so I said, I'll give it a shot. I have some ideas. And if you're okay working under those terms, then let's go. And he said, okay. So away we went. And basically what I did was I did a weathering study where I compared the weathering of tombstones of known age with the same mineralogy, same mineral grain size, same weathering environment. I mean, if you think about it, tombstones are erected and they go into the ground, right? So we took samples at, above, and below the ground line, and the runestone was found buried a maximum of 1 foot deep on one end, and the other end was actually, the backside was sticking out of the ground a little bit. So I thought this would be a perfect, control samples. I mean, everything, all the criteria fit. And after doing that work, we got the dates right there on the tombstones. I came back and concluded that the weathering of the inscription was older than 200 years, because at about 200 years is when the minerals began to come off the surface of the tombstones on the Kensington runestone. They're gone. So it's older than 200 years. And that's from 1898 when it was pulled out of the ground, because it hasn't been in a weathering environment since. So now you push it back 200 years from 1898, and that makes the late 19th century hoax impossible, right? So if that didn't happen, what have you got left? It must be genuine, right? So there was nobody here in Minnesota back in the late 1700s. So, or excuse me, late 1600s. So I concluded it was genuine, and I felt pretty good about the work. I wrote the report, and I thought, well, good for them. They got one, and I was ready to move on until the backlash came. Oh my God! And it was harsh, it was hard, and it was nasty. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? It's like, what? I thought you guys would be happy. And I'm like, okay, look, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. Point out where I made my mistake and I'll fix it. I didn't make a mistake. They just didn't like the results. And I'm like, okay, well, too effing bad. Sometimes things don't go your way, right? And it really, really got testy, and it pissed me off, frankly. So,
So who was they? Who was like attacking you?
mostly academia, some members of the media, but primarily academia. Primarily academia in disciplines like archaeology, anthropology, history, language, runes, dialect, grammar, all these soft science disciplines, right? Humanities disciplines. And I want to make something very clear. These are all wonderful disciplines, and I'm not trying to say that there's something wrong with them. But what these guys were doing was attacking me, telling me that I didn't understand scientific method. And I'm like, are you kidding me? First of all, I'm a geologist, which is a hard science. I run a materials forensic laboratory. I do scientific method all day, every day for 40 years now. And I've got these soft science people. So then what happened is we got into it a little bit. And I have to tell you that I went to college on a football scholarship. I played football up at UMD. It was a D2 school. We won 2 championships, and I played pretty good. And, as a linebacker, you want to go, man. Let's go. I still have that mentality, and that was the mentality that I had at the time. But obviously, I can't frame up these scholars and put them on the ground. So I had to go about it a different way. So what I did was from 2003 to 2005, because The Rock told me it was real. That means that everything in that inscription, if this is an authentic artifact, must have existed in the 14th century, because the date on the stone is 1362, right? I mean, this is simple logic. And I trust rocks. I don't trust some people. If the rock says it's real, that means this stuff has to exist. And all the scholars said none of it existed. And I knew, because the rock said so, that it had to. So I got on a plane 5 times between 2003 and 2005 and found everything. And of course, instead of them going, oh, wow, that's amazing, let's take a look at that, they criticized me even more for having the audacity to go in their backyard. Many of these scholars that attacked me, some of the harshest ones were in Scandinavia. And they got pissed off because I went in their backyard and found what they were too lazy to go look for because it's a hoax. Why bother? And, I thought that was pretty incredible. We also found the hooked X over there, which was pretty cool. And still, they just took this attitude, F you, you're not one of us, so it doesn't count. What are you talking about? I mean, it was just, honestly, it was bizarre. It was mind blowing. But anyway, getting back to how all this came about, at the same time, I was also working on a murder case in Las Vegas, and that's a really good story too. But anyway, in the end, I was able to do some additional work where we took some of the standard techniques that we use on concrete. This victim was found totally encased in concrete. And what they wanted me to do was to try to age date the concrete so that they could establish a time of death, so they could look at their missing case files and not be looking at thousands of cases, narrow it down to a specific time period. And we were able to do that pretty successfully to within about 6 months. And they identified her. So a local reporter here with WCCO TV, a woman by the name of Maria Oz, came to interview me about this murder case. They got wind of it, and so she comes into my office, and I had just come back from Sweden, and I had a poster in my office on the wall of Olof Ullman holding the stone, and I got it because it was an advertisement for a debate that I participated in Sweden. And she walks into my office and she looks at that poster and she goes, "Oh, have you done work on the Kensington Runestone?" And I said, "Ha, sit down. We're going to have a conversation." And anyway, so we had that conversation, and that weekend they aired 2 5-minute dimension stories. On the weekend, on the news, they'll have like a little 3 to 5 minute story in depth about something. On Friday night, they did the murder case. On Saturday, they did the runestone. Well, she went home, and her husband, Andy Oz, was in the process of forming a production company that they called Committee Films. And she told him about the runestone. He called me and he said, "Hey, dude, I want to talk to you about this. This could possibly be great for a documentary." And I said, "Sure." So I said, "Saturday, I'm speaking at the library up in Chanhassen, and why don't you come to that, and you'll get a synopsis of what the story is." So he did that. And then he said, "Hey, let's go have a beer and lunch after this." And we sat down, and he said, "Man, this would make a fantastic documentary. We need to raise about $150,000. But this really has an opportunity to do well, I think." So we did. We tapped our friends and acquaintances. We raised $150,000, and then 4 of us flew over to Europe, and we filmed at different locations, including in Sweden, where I had found all these grave slabs and these features on the runestone they said never existed. And we made a documentary called Holy Grail in America. Have you seen that?
I've not seen that one.
You gotta check it out.
Writing it down
And it's
right now.
Holy Grail in America. And I can tell you this: we made a 4.5 minute pitch reel, and I can still see the opening. It's just dark, and then all of a sudden, a guy, who was that? I'm trying to remember who the expert was, but all of a sudden he's sitting in a chair. All of a sudden you see his face, and he just starts talking about the runestone, and then the other interviews come in, and then the whole thing takes off. It was captivating. And so what they did is they took it to what they call real screen, which is where all the networks, all the productions come and they meet and they pitch new shows, right? And sometimes they'll have like a theater where the networks come in and they'll show these films. And they showed our film, and 6 networks wanted it. And History Channel back then was the one that paid the most, and they picked it up. But what they ended up doing was putting us on H2, History 2, right? Which back then was a little bit different because a lot of the shows that were playing on history were frankly appealing to a younger demographic.
Yeah.
Is that a point?
As a young
The
wish
shows were they weren't as in depth and complicated as our show. And History 2 is where those shows went. But our show did really well. And actually, for those first 3 seasons, we kept competing with Ancient Aliens for the #1 spot. And after 3 seasons, they, they picked it up. They aired the first season. And I remember we were in Newport, Rhode Island. And my birthday is on the winter solstice, December 21st. And there's an amazing event that happens in the Newport Tower on December 21st. And so we were there filming that. And I remember on my birthday was when the first episode was premiering. And we hadn't even finished shooting the season yet. And so I remember that first night, we're all at the Brick Alley pub having dinner and drinking beer and getting ready for the premiere. And I remember our ACAM, Brandon Boulay, he said, "Hey man, if we get another season, we all have to get Hooked X tattoos." And we're all like, "Yeah, fucking A, let's do it," And the show aired, and of course, we all thought it was great. That was the Maya Blue episode. And then after the 4th episode aired, they renewed us for 2 more seasons.
So
So,
you got the okay.
so it was pretty sweet.
Did you get the tattoo?
Well, here's what happened there. I remember when we got renewed, I said, "Oh shit, I got to get a tattoo." And my wife said, "You can't get a tattoo. We have a type 1 diabetic daughter, and she's one of those." Well, dad did. So I'm like, "Oh shit." I mean, I got to do it, but I didn't want to set the example. And my daughter was a young teenager, about the worst possible time to do something like that. Because she's a type 1 diabetic. So piercings and tattoos, life is more complicated for her. So anyway, I had a buddy that I went out to lunch with, and he's an old football player too. And I told him my conundrum, and he said, "F the tattoo, man." He said, "Get a ring." And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's a great idea." So I put him in charge of making the ring. Hold on, I'm going to show it to you.
Oh, awesome.
So when it came, I remember I pulled it out, and I'm like, "Damn, man." I said, "This is too big." And he said, "Go big or go home." So
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, I love that. Okay, that's a lot better than the tattoo.
I think
That's
so.
beautiful.
And then, it's got some interesting symbolism. I think that it says H2 on that side, right? Yep. And then on the other side, we have a cross of Lorraine. And yeah, so yeah, it's beautiful. So anyway,
Well, you brought up though. You brought up earlier about the Holy Grail in America, and a lot of
yeah,
people don't know what the Kensington Stone is, what the Newport Tower is.
right.
Yeah,
God, I
so
just assume everybody knows, but no, that's not
I
true.
know.
Yeah. Well, the
So
Kensington Runestone was found in 1898 by a Swedish immigrant farmer who was clearing trees in preparation for farming. And he tipped over. Well, what he did, he was with his 2 sons, oldest sons, and he cut off the roots around the base of the tree. And then he took a winch and he tipped over this roughly 25 to 30-year-old tree, according to 12 witnesses who all signed written affidavits that are on file at the Minnesota Historical Society. And as the tree fell and the stump pulled up at the same time, it was the younger son, Edward, who noticed that there was this stone that had writing on it. And what's interesting that a lot of people don't know is that this happened in the fall, in late September, and there was a threshing crew. that was on the farm next to Oman. And there were 15 guys on that threshing crew, and they came over and they all saw the stone. And people from town came out to see this thing, and there were a bunch of witnesses that saw the stone that still wrapped in the roots of the tree. So one of the things I find interesting is a lot of archaeologists are quick to say that this thing is a hoax, right? I mean, if you look at the inscription now, I mean, there's nobody in the world that could have carved this inscription, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But there are 9 lines of text on the front. There are 3 lines of text on what I call the split side. And I call it the split side because whoever carved it took a larger slab of rock and intentionally split it down to exactly a 2-to-1 ratio, which is a very sacred ratio. You're not a Freemason, are you? Okay. Freemasons will know exactly what I'm talking about. The other thing that is an interesting coincidence is that if you measure the stone diagonally from the upper left corner to the lower right, that distance is exactly 2.722 feet or 31.62 inches, which is exactly, not close, exactly 1 megalithic yard, which is an ancient measurement that is calculated using the planet Venus. I don't want to digress too much, but what I'm doing is I'm telling you some facts that the world doesn't even know about to this day, because information about the runestone has been suppressed because the world does not want this artifact to be real. And that sounds like a pretty grandiose statement, but it's true. And there are reasons why they don't want this to be true, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, and 9 and 3 equals what?
12.
12. Yes. And there's a reason for that. All of this, the inscription is absolutely carefully crafted. There is symbolism, there's allegory, it's filled with code, and a lot of the assumptions that people have made about the runestone are absolutely false. But anyway, we can get into that a little bit. So anyway, so the stone is found, and of course it made a lot of news at the time. And it was immediately a copy of the inscription was sent to the University of Minnesota, where the first academic to look at it was then professor of Scandinavian languages, Olaus Breda, looked at a handwritten copy of the inscription, which contained some errors and was missing a word, one of the words. He didn't know what the hell he was looking at, frankly. And when you look at his transcription, you see question marks all through it. Roughly half the inscription was question marks in his translation, which tells you that he didn't know what it was. But he didn't have the courage or the nads, frankly, to say those 3 little words. I don't know. And instead he said, oh, this is a hoax, and dismissed it. Now, some people might say, okay, so what? Just send it off to the next guy. You don't understand how academia works. This was the guy, right, in the United States at the time. And if he says it's a hoax, the next guy to come along is not going to trample on his legacy. And as it turns out, the next guy, he wouldn't know anything either, or the next guy, or the next guy. So what you have is this false narrative that gets passed on through academia, because first and foremost, they didn't know what they were looking at. And secondly, you are not going to do anything to disparage the reputation of your predecessor. That's just the way it works. And I understand that to a point, because I respect my professors, that I learned under. But I can tell you this, if they made a mistake, they would own up to it. And there were a couple times where I caught them, or somebody else would catch them on something. I mean, a minor little thing, and they'd say, hey, good catch, And it's not about playing gotcha. It's not about proving somebody wrong. It's about getting it right.
Right.
And so that's one of the fundamental problems that I see with academia in the soft science disciplines.
on that token, I'm gonna piggyback on that one too. So in the cryptid field, believe it or not, there's a lot of the same thing that's going on. So a lot of the
Really?
biology and a lot of the information that comes out there is based on information that's 500 years old. If you take a look at the platypus, for example, the people in
Yeah.
Cambridge didn't believe it. The mountain gorilla wasn't officially recognized by science until the 1920s.
Right. Right.
When these European explorers would go out to the world and they would meet ingenious people and they'd be going, "Hey, there's a hippo." Yep. And they would say, "Yeah, the guys from Cambridge go, yeah, you're right. That's a hippo. We know what a hippo is." They go through the list of animals until they come up with one they don't know. And instead of going, "Well, let's discover it," they'll be, "Oh, no, that doesn't exist because this guy back in Cambridge says there's no way this can exist." So
Yeah.
a
Who's
lot of
sitting in
our
his
cryptid field, yep,
yeah,
based upon
who's
that.
sitting in a chair not doing shit, right?
Exactly.
And this is the same thing. The one thing that I will, but I'm a geologist. I mean, when I and I've always been very physical, right? I still play basketball, I still play softball, and 66 years old. That the secret is never stop. But I'm just used to getting out in the field, and I don't sit there and talk about it. I always tell people you're not going to find anything sitting around talking about it. You got to get your butt out there and go look. And what I have found, and I've done this, I can't tell you countless times. I'll go on a trip someplace, and I'm going to go investigate something, and I have a list of items that I'm hoping to achieve, right? And if I get this, this, and this, it'll be a success. And what happens many times when I go out there, I have this list of things I'm hoping to find, and then I'll find something that exceeds all of that, right? It's like, holy crap, forget this stuff. How about this, right? And that's what happens when you get out there and you go look and you go do it. And that's what I've always done. And I'm going to do it till I can't anymore. And that's not going to be for a while.
Now I told you about the Sasquatch research as well. I mean, I'm just a
Yeah.
veteran, and I'm limited in what I can do, and I'm going to keep doing it until I can't. And the only way we're going to get to the bottom of any of this stuff, on my side, which is the cryptid side, is through getting out in the field, getting out in the woods, and actually boots on the ground to do the research. Instead
Right,
of sitting at
right,
home and reading a book about what somebody else wrote on their
right.
experiences, get out and get into it. And that's what I love about it. So academia goes after you. You guys get the show started. I mean, it was a great show. And your thoughts now, the Knights Templar did come, and we have evidence now. They did show up to the New World. And you believe the
They
Holy
were,
Grail's here, or
well, let me answer the first question first. Did the Knights Templar come to the New World? They were coming here all the time. They would come virtually every year. What was Here's the reason why there's a couple of reasons why the world does not understand this in a large way. First and foremost, the Knights Templar supposedly was the fighting force for the Roman Catholic Church, right? They fought the Crusades, and they became immensely wealthy and powerful, and they would do the dirty work for the church, and they were good Catholics. And everything I just told you is absolutely false. First of all, they were not good Catholics. They were Gnostics, Gnostic Christians. They were the ideological and biological descendants of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, John the Baptist. Their ancestors go back to the Egyptians, and they go back to the Atlanteans beyond that. So know that. Fighting the Crusades and capturing Jerusalem was not for Christendom. It was to establish a base of operations in the region so that they could go to different places like Lebanon, Turkey, Egypt, and round up stuff that their ancestors had left for them. It was all part of a mission that was called the Covenant. And that mission was ultimately to establish a sanctuary, a place across the ocean, far to the west, is the language on the runestone. A place where people could live free from the tyranny of the monarchs of Europe, free from the persecution of the Roman Catholic Church. And those tenets are ingrained in our Constitution. That new free Templar state, they called it in the Sinclair Weems journals. They also called it the New Jerusalem. Brother Francis Bacon called it the New Atlantis. And it's now called the United States of America. But the mission started with the Crusades. They rounded up all the stuff. They became immensely wealthy through land acquisition, sheep farming, agriculture, and banking. And eventually, when they were put down, and the King of France raided the treasury in Paris of the Knights Templar, and they opened up the doors, and there was nothing there. It was gone. Then they went to La Rochelle, where there were 18 ships loaded with treasure. That on the morning of Friday the 13th, they go there, and the ships are gone, and they disappeared into history. This book tells us exactly what happened. And it's an amazing freaking story. And at the time, King Robert the Bruce of Scotland had just been excommunicated by the church for killing a clergy, a priest in a church in 1306. And he was setting the table for the Templars to come up. And in 1307, they went to Scotland. And eventually those treasures made their way to the eastern Firth of Forth in Weems Caves. And then starting in 1395 and 1398, those treasures were brought over to North America. They were hidden in multiple places, including Oak Island, for someday. And then the obligation of protecting those treasures was handed off to Earl Henry Sinclair's son. He was the one that brought those treasures over, and 120 remaining descendants of those Knights Templar who fled, who during this time basically said, we're being hunted by the Roman Church. They want to kill us. The plague is ravaging through Europe. I think we're going to take our chances over in North America. But there's one other key thing that people need to understand, and is one of the fundamental reasons why I know this story is true. When the Vikings came over, the pagan Vikings, and they tried to establish settlements on the eastern seaboard, they were assholes, and they did not get along with the natives. They didn't respect their culture. They weren't civilized. They basically said, screw you, we're staying. So the Algonquin nations in the Northeast region met in tribal council with the Iroquois nations, who were the badasses. And they basically said, you're going to have to deal with these white people sooner or later, so you might as well take care of it now. So they went up there and wiped them all out. That's why the Vikings left. It's not because it was too cold or whatever the archaeologists want to claim. Now, you know how I know this? Because the natives told me. And I'll tell you about that in a sec. When the Templars came over, they had a different ideology. Remember I told you they were Gnostic Christians? And they venerated the Virgin Mary. In fact, Bernard de Clairvaux, who was the charismatic leader of the Knights Templar, was a Cistercian monk who first joined the order at Citeaux in 1113, and then founded the first daughter abbey in 1115 at Clairvaux, hence the name Bernard de Clairvaux. Venerated the Virgin Mary to the point where some of the popes got a little uncomfortable and said, you know, we like the Virgin Mary too, but you might want to tone it down a little bit. Well, the reason that he was venerating Mary, it wasn't that Mary, it was a different Mary, i.e., who was emblematic of the goddess, matriarchal, right? This is an ancient faith. Well, guess what? The Native Americans are matriarchal too. So they had that in common. And they formed a deep spiritual bond with the indigenous people through ritual, through a common veneration of the goddess, and through intermarriage. And basically, when Earl Henry and those 8 ships brought over those 120 remaining Knights Templar, the natives basically said, gold, silver, and jewels mean nothing to us. You are our brothers. If you want us to guard this, we will guard it for you. And they did that for 4 centuries. And then what happened was Earl Henry's son was given the obligation to come over and check on the treasures. Unfortunately, that Henry um, was serving about 12 years of his adult life in the Tower of London as a political prisoner. He wrote in the journals that he disliked the smell of the sea, and unfortunately, I cannot fulfill the obligation that my father has entrusted to me. His son was then given the obligation from that Henry, who said, this is what you must do. I was not able to do it, but you must go over there. That was William St. Clair, William the Builder. He is the guy who built Roslyn Chapel. He went over when he was 24 years old, and he met with the natives. They bonded with the natives because they shared that common ideology. He also met with the surviving Knights Templar, who were now old men and were married and had children. Some of them had grandchildren. And they told them stories about his grandfather, who he never met, who we learn in his journal that his father or grandfather, Earl Henry Sinclair, died in 1404. William was born in 1408. So he's learning about his grandfather from all these Knights Templar who knew him. And he was and checked on the treasures to make sure they were safe, and they were, shared meals and bonded with the natives and kept that, that connection going. And on the way back, he writes in the journal, I resolved to build a chapel in stone in honor of my grandfather and the knights who stayed behind. That chapel is now called Roslyn Chapel. From the Da Vinci Code?
Yep,
Do you remember that?
I do. Yep.
Anyway, and the story is incredible. And then there were 2 more generations of Sinclairs. Unfortunately, his son was called William the Waster. And he was basically an asshole. And in his journal, he wrote that I'm going to go over and check on the treasures, but I'm going to bring one of them back so I can expand my land holdings. But the natives picked up on him, and he wrote they wouldn't even let the ship land.
Oh, wow.
And how they knew that, I don't know. His son was just as bad, and his sister was Catherine Sinclair. She was married to a Weems, James Weems. And she did not trust her brother. When her oldest brother died and the journals went into the family vault, her one surviving younger brother, she did not trust. So she took the journals and she read them. They were all in Latin at that time. And she gave them to her husband and said, you are the one to take over the covenant. I do not trust my brothers. That's how the journals and the obligation and the covenant changed from the Sinclair clan to the Weems clan. And then for the next 10 generations, they went over 9 times. Only one generation of Weems did not fulfill the mission of the covenant. And he was very remorseful about it, but who knows? I mean, it's a big thing, right? So that's basically the story of the covenant. And I want to come back to the Native American angle for just a sec and jump in if you want to ask a question. But part of the reason I'm going on this monologue, I'm trying to save your voice.
You're doing great. And because I was just about to ask you, talking about the natives working with the Templars. So when the Pilgrims came over as well, and they, to Plymouth Rock, do you think there's correlations where they already knew they were coming? And they were.
Hell yeah.
Is that the reason why the first?
Oh, hell yeah.
We
Oh,
honored them.
yeah. The natives, the Templars went all over North America, all over South America, all over Central America. I mean, this is like I mean, here's what historians want us to believe. Think about this for a sec, okay? The Vikings were booted out around the year 1000, right? Some say 1050. And then for 500 years, nothing happened until Chris. Are you effing kidding me? That doesn't even pass the smell test,
Nope.
okay? And the Templars were coming over here, and if you have a good fishing spot or a good hunting spot, are you going to tell people?
Nope.
Hello? I mean, you've got wood, you've got minerals, you got fish, you got land, you got beautiful native women, you've got willing trading partners. I mean, you're going to go back, hey guys, come on over, we got this great gig. No, for Christ's sake, no. And we know that when the Templars that the ones that were part of the covenant, and these weren't the only trips that were happening. Um, they were bonding with the natives. That's why when Columbus came over, he was flying the Templar cross on his sails because he knew that the Templars had already been there. He knew that they had bonded with the natives. And when they saw the cross, they would say, oh, our friends are back. Except he was a ruthless asshole and he brutalized the natives and he was greedy and he was horrible. But
Yeah.
anyway,
No, I agree. And the cool thing, the part about Columbus there is that when he did get to the New World, was you mentioned the flag. The natives greeted him
yes.
with open arms. There was no
Why?
hesitation, nothing at all. Exactly. And it's just something that
Because
history just
it was
glosses
their
over.
brothers had returned.
Yep. And there's even talk
Yeah,
about that to where they mention a god, a pale god, in
yeah,
Central America who left by the sea and will return by the sea. And so when
right.
Columbus arrived, that's what they were. That's how they interpreted it as. But with the Knights coming over, with the Templars showing up, with the Templars coming over, I mean, boom. I mean, that just makes more sense. And
Well,
that,
that's
I mean,
it makes more sense. It makes more sense because that's what happened,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
And the other thing about Columbus that a lot of people don't know is that, people say, well, how did he know about the New World? Well, from Templar maps that he got from the wife or the daughter of a famous Portuguese Templar ship captain by the name of, oh God, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Anyway, it'll come back to me. But what he did is he pulled this woman out of a nunnery and married her so that he could get access to her father's Drummond. Her name was Drummond. And he was a ship captain named Drummond who inherited these Templar maps. He'd already been over to the New World. Columbus got a hold of those. And then he went to the Portuguese and said, hey, will you finance these trips to the New World? And the Portuguese said, no, we've been there many times. We don't need your help, pal. And so that's why he went to Spain, the king and queen of Spain, and got their assistance, right? And because of that, he had to pony up the wealth and pay them back, right? And that's part of the reason why he was so brutal. And he was singularly focused on gold and silver and jewels and wealth. But anyway, that whole Columbus narrative is such BS. It's not even funny.
no.
But
So do you
anyway,
think that maybe part of the reason why he was coming over to the New World was to try and claim the Templar treasure?
I don't. No, I don't think so. I think he was looking for his own treasure. He may have been looking for Templar treasure, but there was no chance of him finding it because the bulk of the treasures were not in the Caribbean. They were up in the northern area around Nova Scotia. So if he was looking for treasure, he was in the wrong spot. But there were other guys that would follow him shortly afterwards and go up into that region, like Ponce de Leon and Verrazano and some of these other explorers. But they were Templars too, and they knew exactly where they were going. They had maps. None of this is coincidence. But I do want to get back to the natives for just a sec.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, when I was doing my work on the Runestone, one of the things that we figured out is that where the runestone was placed was not an accident. And it turns out that the runestone is placed on the north-south continental divide of North America. Now, why am I the first person to figure this out? That to me is astonishing because I'm a nice boy. I'm reasonably intelligent, but I'm not that smart. But I do understand logic, that everything has to fit. It has to make sense, right? And it's kind of curious that 1362 is only a few decades after the put down of the Templars, right? I found that very interesting. And the reason that I followed the Templar trail is when I went over to Sweden, I ended up on the island of Gotland, which is interesting because on the stone, the first thing it says is 8 Gotlanders, and 22 Norwegians, Northmen. I went to Gotland, and there are 92 churches on that island. They are all Cistercian. I went to all 92 of them because I'm an anal retentive lab guy. And it was on grave slabs that had been brought into the churches from medieval times, that were mortared into the floors, that were still preserved, that had these runic features that were on the runestone. And so I would go into these churches and I'd find this word here, this rune here, this language feature here, that they said never existed. Well, there they are. They're right there. And right in the right time period, right? So anyway, I'm like, who are the Cistercians? Oh, the white monks. They were founded by Bernard and blah blah blah, and then the Templars. I mean, it just rolled right into the Templars. It was the easiest evidence trail I've ever followed. Well, who are the Templars? And they were the fighting force, and they had the greatest shipping fleet in the world at that time, and they had experts at navigation. Oh, gee, things are starting to connect, right? And eventually they were put down in 1307. Look, this is not heavy lifting, right? This is easy. And so, I do forensics for a living. And when a building falls down or concrete cracks or has low strength or whatever the problem is, I like to say to people, look, the concrete didn't crack just to piss you off, okay? It did it for a reason. And so if you get me the right samples, if I get the right evidence, we'll figure it out. There's always a reason why this happens. There's a reason somebody carved the runestone. They came from some place. They came all the way over here for some reason. And all this stuff has to fit. So why did they come to the geographic center of North America? Well, I can guarantee you one thing. They didn't fight their way to Kensington, right? There's no freaking way at that time they're going to fight their way to the center of the continent. The natives didn't want them to go. They're not going.
Nope.
So this whole idea that they bonded at a deep spiritual level with their brothers, because they call them their brothers in these journals. They were led to the geographic center, and they placed the runestone as a land claim because, as it turns out, in the 14th century, both the French, and I don't think I need to remind you that the Knights Templars headquarters was in France, and they were founded in France, okay? And the Dutch had a land claim practice where if you could prove that you navigated to the headwaters of a river system and placed a land claim stone in the ground and oftentimes a tin plaque in a tree for redundancy, the tree's not permanent, but the stone is, right?
Right.
You could lay claim to the entire river system and all the land associated with it. So at Kensington, Minnesota, on that geographic divide, they could have laid claim to the entire Mississippi, Missouri watershed all the way to the Gulf and the Red River, Hudson Bay watershed to the north, which is about half the continent. So now we're cooking with gas, right? And why has nobody thought about this? Why were we the first? Because we knew the stone was real and that there had to be an answer to all of these questions. And I can answer every question now. I know exactly who did it, why they did it. I can tell you the name of the guy who carved it. Father Richards. It's right in here. And there's more, a lot more. But anyway, I'll let you talk.
Wow. Oh yeah. Wow. I'm processing so much information. All right. Well, so back to the Grail. So do you think the Grail's a cup, or do you think it's a bloodline, or over here? I thought the
Well,
conspiracy's in there. I mean, because you
that
mentioned
is
the
that.
Grail earlier, so that's what I was
Yes.
curious about.
Okay. Well, you know, the question is, what is the Grail? Really is the question. Because to some people, the Grail is the cup of Christ that they used at the Last Supper.
I'll make you
Some
laugh.
people, oh, look at that. There it is, the Grail right there. Some people believe that the Grail is the womb of Mary, right? Where the bloodline is perpetuated. Some people think it's treasure. Some people think it's ancient knowledge. Some people think the Grail is North America and the United States of America. Ultimately, that was that sanctuary that was founded. Some people think that it's enlightenment, right? So there's a lot of things that the Grail could be. I think the Grail definitely means different things to different people. So I'm not sure that there is a accepted, agreed upon definition of the Grail, and I think that's part of what makes it so cool. Is the Grail is different things to different people. I personally think it's all of those things.
I agree. I agree with you on
Yeah,
that one. I think
yeah,
that the romance behind the Grail, and for the everlasting life that is promised to the Grail, you chose properly, all that good stuff. But so with the Templars coming over here, and I know you've been to the Southwest as well. I've seen your episodes, obviously.
yep,
So,
yep.
so
The Tucson led artifacts. That was a different group that came much earlier than when the Templars started coming over, probably in the eighth or ninth century. Um, those things are 100% authentic as well. They're incredible. What a treasure trove of artifacts, and academia just turns up its nose. And we've looked into the Tucson lead artifacts in great depth, not just on the show, but in real life. And I, I mean, I have seen, reports that were written by archaeologists that came from the East and actually dug up artifacts. And they wrote, this particular artifact was found in a clean archaeological context. No evidence of intrusion, no evidence of planting, but because it doesn't fit the narrative, it's fake. What? What are you saying? I mean, this is beyond stupid. And we're supposed to accept these people, the word of these people that can't even put together simple basic logic and contradict themselves at the highest level. You're saying this was collected in a clean archaeological context, but it's fake? I
that
don't even
some
know what to
farmer,
say to that. I
yeah,
mean,
some
it's
farmer
it's
set this up. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, give me a break. I do want to say, I would tell you one more quick story. Um, about, God, it's probably 12, 13 years ago now. Um, I was in Canada and I was invited to participate in a Midday sweat. And this was before I was a Freemason, although I had studied Freemasonry uh, uh, intently, and I knew enough to be extremely dangerous. And I was invited by somebody. Well, it was Bill Mann, the past Grand Master of Knights Templar in Canada, and he was Knights installed right when COVID started, and because of that, he had to be the Grand Master for like 4 years because they couldn't get together in a conclave and elect a new Grand Master. So Bill was Grand Master for a long time, and he's also half Indigenous. His mother is Ojibwa. And so he invited me to an Ojibwa Midday sweat. And Midday is the name of the secret society of the natives. They practice Freemasonry just like we do. And it's the same. The rituals are the same. The officers sit in the same um, spaces in the lodge. The lodge dimensions are the same. There are some interesting differences, but essentially it's the death and resurrection ritual. And so I participated in this sweat with the intention of asking the medicine man who was leading the sweat questions about the Templars. Do the indigenous people still remember the Templars? So it took about an hour and a half. It was super hot, but I did it. And then the medicine man said to me, okay, Scott, go ahead and ask your questions. And I said, well, I would like to ask you some questions about the Knights Templar. And he looked at me and he said, oh, you mean our blood brothers? And it went pretty good after that. So to any academics or any skeptics out there that doubt this story that the Knights Templar were coming to North America all the time, don't believe me. I want you to tell the indigenous people that they're full of shit. Good luck with that. I trust them. I don't trust academics.
Sorry, I had it muted there. One, you're right. But again, they're not going to believe them. They're not going to believe the people. They're not going to believe the natives because it goes against the narrative. Now, I mean, we're going to talk about there's a resurgence of how we're respecting the natives now.
Yeah.
We're really not.
Well, the other thing that's happened here recently is there have been new laws put forth that that archaeologists are no longer allowed to dig in burial mounds, earthen mounds of the natives. They're not able to handle human remains. They want all that stuff returned. And frankly, since those laws have passed, I don't know what relevance the archaeologists have these days. I mean, they're not able to grave rob like they did for over a century. So what are they going to do now? Sit around and complain is what I'm seeing. And I think what they need to do is just take a step back and rethink a lot of the things that they have said and done and, reinvent themselves. And one of the things that I always tried to do, and I still do, is I'm more than happy to work with other people in different disciplines. I think this interdisciplinary communication and working together is the way to get farther down the track than working on separate paths. And, archaeologists, for some reason, and not all of them, but most of them, for whatever reason, don't like me. And well, part of the reason is because I speak pretty freely about what I think and they don't like it, but I don't have time to sit there and glad hand and BS when these are the people that have attacked me. I'm an easy guy to get along with, but if you pull out the horns, I'll do the same thing. But here's the deal. Archaeologists dig in the dirt, right? Right? Dirt is weathered rock. And they find ceramic pots and artifacts, right? Ceramics are made from fired clay. Clay is weathered rock.
Right.
They find arrowheads, stone tools, lithic artifacts. Lithic is another word for rock, right? Everything they deal with is rock in one state or another, right? So you would think that geologists and archaeologists are a match made in heaven as far as working together, right? And I know some of that does happen, but not enough of it happens. Because of all the geologists out there, the one that probably knows, one of the most, that knows a lot about this interdisciplinary connection between archaeology is me. And so I just think that there's some opportunities that are missed there. I would love to work with them. But one of the first things that has to happen is they got to get off this BS narrative that the Kensington Runestone is fake. It's not fake. One of the other things I will say real quick, and I'm not going to go into the details right now, we don't have time, but when I became a Freemason and I went through a York Rite ritual, specifically the select master degree, all of a sudden I had an epiphany when one of the white hats, one of the 33rds, did the lecture after the degree. And he said, the secret vault was constructed. This is the legend of Enoch, right? This is part of the Enochian mysteries. That the secret vault at the 9th level was built by the 3 grand masters, Hiram Abiff, Hiram King of Tyre, which is in Lebanon, and King Solomon. They built the secret vault where a copy of all the true treasures that were up in the Sanctum Sanctorum were stored. And then he said this, the other 8 arches were built by 22 men from Gebel, which is Lebanon. And I went, 8 and 22. Those are the first 2 numbers on the Kensington runestone. 8 Goths and 22 Northmen. And I didn't hear another thing after that. And I went, oh my God, is there a ritual book? And I went to my Masonic mentor, John Freeberg. I said, John, is there a ritual book here? He said, yes. I said, give me that. And I started to read it. And oh my God, the runestone. Now, the Enochian mysteries, when you read them, you learn about the secret vault. It helped me understand, and I did a bunch of research into this, and I eventually wrote my last book prior to this one. No, it was 2 books ago. I published in 2019 called The Cryptic Code of the Templars in America. It was in the cryptic council degrees that I made this discovery. And to my knowledge, and I've been around the country giving this lecture to lodges and grand lodges, and I've spoke many places, many free, including in Washington D.C. at the Scottish Rite Temple. No Freemason, no academic Freemason has challenged this discovery. In fact, they have endorsed it. So what we know is that the carver of the Kensington runestone was a deeply initiated monk, Templar monk. And we now know his name, and his name is in these journals. And there is no way that anybody living in the late 19th century could possibly have carved this inscription that is so complicated, has such depth, symbolism, allegory, code. You will be hearing about aspects of the runestone in the future that we are going to reveal. And I will just finish by saying this. In 2021, the Knights Templar commander, the Grand Master of all Knights Templar in America, in the York Rite, bestowed an honor onto me, the highest honor that you can get as a Knights Templar, which I am. And they consecrated the ground. They held this ceremony at the discovery spot where the Kensington runestone was discovered, because the order now accepts the Kensington runestone as part of our Templar history, and they have consecrated that ground. Now, that was done in a private Templar ceremony, but I can talk about it because I was there and I was the one that received this honor. So the world is going to come around eventually. I hope it happens in my lifetime, but there is so much more to come about this story. And it all starts with the runestone, and man, you have no idea what's coming. And it's unbelievable.
I can't wait. Well, let's tell everybody about your new book, where they
Okay.
can find that at real quick. I want to
All
find
right.
the book.
It's called The Greatest Templar Tale Never Told, the Sinclair Weems Journals. And my publisher came up with this sort of old leather book style design, which I really like. And of course, there's some interesting stuff on the back. That picture, author's photo, is me holding the green jar, which I posted a couple of months ago after we discovered it. And I really can't talk about what's in that jar yet, but what I will tell you is that there is ancient knowledge that is preserved inside that jar by our Templar order. It's not a coincidence that that I was the person that found it with 3 other people, but I will tell you what's in that jar has the potential to change the world. And I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. And when we do reveal this, which will be fairly soon, your head will explode. And I'm not exaggerating even a little bit.
Well, if I'm lucky enough, I get you back on the show when that happens.
Okay. Well, hey, this is going really well, man. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say for people that are interested, if you want a signed copy, go to my website, which is just scottfwolter, one word.com. And, scroll through, you'll see it. It's comes up right away, and I will sign it. I'll personalize it, and I'll ship them out. Like I said, I sent 71 books out yesterday. I'm going to have to wait till Monday now to get the rest of them out, but I have a bunch more. But I'm sure you can get it on Amazon cheaper, but I don't think they don't have them in their warehouses yet, let alone in the stores. But they will have it probably by February. But if you want one now, I got them.
Yep, I'll be going to the website here shortly. So, Scott, thank you so much for coming on. This was a huge honor for me. I know you're busy. I know you got plans for the day. So
Yeah,
thank you for taking time out on your Saturday morning to come on. And I'm hoping you had a good time. I'll sound better next time if you come back on, I promise.
yeah.
So I'll be able
Well,
to
hey,
interact a little
listen,
bit
man,
more.
I'm here to help. You're a brother, and your voice is hurting. That means I'm feeling good today, so I wanted to take over and let you rest it. But thank you for having me, and we will definitely do it again. One other thing, if anybody wants to engage with me, you can go to my blog, which is scottwolteranswers.blogspot.com. And I've got all kinds of content there. Every single episode of America Unearthed that we ever did, I would write a blog about it. And of course, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. And if you wanna ask me a question or you want to engage me on any topic, hit me up there and I'll hit you back.
You're awesome, Scott. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Okay.
All right,
All
pal.
right.
All right, just guys,
Take care, everybody.
just stick around just for 1 second. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of the Drunken Cryptids. I will sound better on the next one, I promise.
I can do anything that I want. I can do anything that I want now. I can do anything that I want. Hey, hey, if it is to be, you know that it's up to me. I'm headed to the front. I can be anything that I want. I can be anything that I